Story 1 by Reddit user Internal Car 8922. This story is from my misspent childhood, when I am well and truly a nerdy kid and relates to the house I grew up in. The background. Before I was born, there was a systematic program that destroyed Native American culture and ripped off the United States government while doing so. It also victimized many of those that it was intended to serve. I speak now of the American Indian training schools, or boarding schools set up by various churches and government entities in the United States during the 19th and first half of the 20th century. The goal was both assimilation and elimination. Teach the Native Americans housed in the school how to be good Christians and Americans with useful skills and ability with English. But, at the same time, suppress their own languages, religion, and culture, and get paid by the state to do it. Now don't get me wrong, there was some good that came out of this system. There were job opportunities that became available to graduates that they would never have otherwise had. But the cost to benefit was ultimately not worth it. Many participants were victimized in every way that a child can be victimized. In my own ever-be-humble opinion, the best thing to come out of this program was the rejection of forced assimilation and the resurgence of interest in traditional languages, cultures, and religions. But, like I said, this was before I was born. During my life, there was a weak continuation of the program in many areas of the country. Some churches continued to propagate a Christianizing of Native Americans by offering their children placement in good Christian homes during the school year, where they would get a white man's education. Yes, that's the term they used. It is offensive. And learn English as well as be taught proper religion. This program has now been largely discontinued. Current efforts are to build up the educational opportunities available on the reservations to where a proper education is available to all. I have personally volunteered time and money to such enterprises and will continue to do so. Early years. In my early years growing up, my two older sisters often complained about seeing things in the house that freaked them out that none of the rest of us saw. I personally thought it was all in their heads, because whenever I would come into the room, they claimed it would stop. I never saw anything. I won't venture to describe much what they did. That's their story to tell if they care to. Let's just say there were frequent mentions of floating eyes and disembodied heads and faces. Again, I never saw any of this. But I did end up spending many nights vigil on the floor of one of their rooms as a preventative. I honestly suspected it related to a confirmed peeping Tom issue we had in the neighborhood that seemed aimed at the little girls on our street. This detail frames our initial responses to the event this post describes, as well as some of the aftermath. The setup. When my older sister Layla is 12 years old, she makes a friend at school. Lily is from the Navajo Nation reservation in the Four Corners area where Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona all touch. It is the only place in the United States where 4 states come together, and a bit of a tourist trap moneymaker for the Navajo Nation who owns the piece of land where it happens. I visited it once. It is pretty cool to get your picture taken with each foot and hand in a different state. Worth the cost to visit at least once in your life. And believe me, the money goes to good ends. Lily is living with a good Christian family for the school year, and she and Layla really hit it off. In previous posts on other subreddits, I've described how my mother Canary was a Christian missionary to Japan, who ended up doing research and writing books in both English and Japanese that were not particularly Christian in nature. We were raised with Japanese actively spoken in our home and at gatherings and activities outside our home. Many of my parents' friends were Japanese. They were taught to respect the language, religion, and culture of others. Period. It didn't matter which ones. And so, as Lily learns better English, Layla learns some Navajo. As Lily and Layla share religious experience in a Christian context, Layla learns from Lily the ways of her religion, and it is mutually enriching. But then the school year draws to an end and Lily is to return home a few states away. Layla is distraught. Canary opens discussion with Lily's mother and it is decided that Layla will go home with Lily since there is room on the bus taking many young Navajos back home. They will return together in the fall when the new school year starts. And so begins a pattern that will continue for much of Layla's remaining years of grade school. Lily never lives with us. We are not considered a suitable host family for a number of reasons. But she always returns to the same family, so she remains in the same school. Layla spends her summers on the reservation. And boy, she comes home tanned. But even with a natural darkening of the skin, her blonde hair, made blonder by the same exposure to the sun, and blue eyes are impossible to hide. She is not of the Dine. The trigger. When Layla is 17, she's helping Lily's family at a roadside stand where they sell much of their jewellery. Lily's family is famous for their silver and turquoise jewellery. What they don't sell at trading posts, they sell directly along the roadside. Something Lily made very clear from the beginning is that Layla would not be learning anything about making jewellery. Family secrets are family secrets, and even other Navajo families would like to learn her family's techniques. That is a multi-generational nope. But Layla can help the family sell their wares. On this day, things do not go well. They make some good sells. That's not the issue. They have a visit from a person to whom the family pays great deference. Layla has never seen them so respectful with anyone before. The visitor speaks no English but is clearly very unhappy about the presence of my sister with the family. Her aspect is angry and indignant. While Layla barely understands what she says, the gist is understood. When the visitor has left, Lily's mother tells Layla, "Tomorrow, you go home. I cannot protect you from this." So Layla returns home a month early by Greyhound. She gives no explanation. It will be years until I get the full story I am sharing here. The consequence. About a week after Layla returns home, something starts to happen. To understand this part of the story, you need to understand a bit of the layout of our neighborhood. Our house is on a 3/4-acre lot of land at the end of a circle with a farm on one side and a small river running behind it. At this time, the other side of the river is mostly fields and horse pastures. There are animals we normally see here. We have about 100 cats living in and around our property. We have dogs. We have frogs and muskrats and other creatures that need the river to live. We have snakes and any kind of insect you can imagine. We are too far into the populated areas to ever see any large predators. No mountain lions, no coyotes, no wolves, no bears, no foxes, not even very many raccoons. There are cows and horses in the neighborhood, and a rooster crow will wake us most mornings. This night, I'm awakened from a deep sleep by Layla. We all gather into the highest room in the house, the room where Layla sleeps when she is home. There is a howling in the breeze coming from somewhere beyond the river. I'm not clever enough to know the difference between wolf and coyote howls, but it is definitely along those lines. I've heard this song before when on a survival camp in the desert. It came clear and crisp on the wind and woke me then. It was so cold at night in the desert. The fire was out, but the howls were far away, so there were no worries. Then, a response came from the other side of us, and it was much too close for comfort. I did not sleep again that night. And now, something like that song is being sung here in town where it has no business being. And it is getting closer. At my oldest sister's instruction, we all join in prayer together. After that, I don't recall much more of that night. I wake up in the morning on the floor in my sister's room. When asking about last night, no one will talk about it. I have a million questions, but will get no answers. And then the night comes again. This time we are all gathered in my sister's room and the sleeping bags are brought out. We pray together, and I eventually drift off to the wonderful land of Nod, only to be awakened by howling again, only much closer. I drift in and out of sleep. In the morning, there are scratch marks on the back door, only they are too high for a normal canine to have made, and they are deep and powerful. The Medicine Woman. This day, Layla is able to get Lily on the phone. After they talk, my oldest sister drives Layla somewhere, but again, no one is telling me anything. I will later learn that Lily gave Layla the name of a medicine woman near us. Name and address, no phone number. Lily told her to tell the medicine woman what had happened on the reservation, and that a dogman had been sent. In that evening, Canary brings a priest to bless the house and each of us. After he leaves, my sisters bring in a short old Navajo woman with a deep smile and a great deal of silver and turquoise literally from head to foot. She wears a short round hat and has her hair in 2 long grey braids down both sides of her face. They go down to at least her knees and have a lot of silver and turquoise woven in as well. She has 3 bundles of smudge. One is definitely white sage, but I have no idea what the other 2 are. She smudges the house and each of us. She uses each of the bundles for different things. She chants, sings in Navajo the whole time. My sisters go into my sister's room with her, and you can hear talking and more singing. I am not allowed to see, and it is never spoken of again. We again huddle in my sister's room that night. We pray together and sing church songs together. The old Navajo woman sits in a chair in the hall beside the back door and watches and listens, and hums to herself. When the howling starts, she gets up and walks outside. Tonight, the howling stays distant. It never approaches. In the morning, the old woman smiles at me kindly. She says, 3 more. Layla explains that we need to do it all again for 3 more nights. And we do. Smudge and chant and songs and prayer. The howling seems further each night. The last night it is not heard at all. Howling of the kind will never be heard again in my neighborhood. In the morning, Layla makes a gift for the woman of some beautiful pieces of jewelry that Lily and her family had given her over the years. They were accepted graciously. Looking at one that had particular emotional importance to my sister, she shakes her head and hands it back. No, she keeps the rest. She smiles deeply at me as she leaves. I will never see her again, but I can never forget her deep, pure smile. She was a force for good in the world. Later. When in later years, as I learned the rest of the story described above, I asked Layla to explain dogman to me. She just smiles and says that talking about it will invite it, and that it is not an invitation she is making. She will speak no further about it. Layla and Lily continue to be as close as any sisters, but Lily will never allow Layla to return to live with her on the reservation again. She says it is too dangerous. Lily does eventually live with us. She lives rent-free while going to college. For all intents and purposes, she is my sister. I ask her about this event. She smiles and chides me with one phrase that I hear most often from her. You talk too much. She then tells me that is not for me, and that is all I will ever get from her on the matter. From what I have been able to gather from hearing my sister speak on the matter twice more over the years and just picking up things here or there, it seems no matter where my sister went, this dogman would have found her, and it would not have ended well. The medicine woman helped us by misdirecting it and sent it on an impossible trail to follow and keep it busy until this assignment was replaced by a new one. I could be wrong about this, but that's what it sounded like to me. I have, of course, since heard of skinwalkers and now realise this is the modern term for what Lily called dogmen back in the day. It was not a term any of us had heard of when these events happened. I never saw it. I was never told much about it. I'm not a source of any useful information on the topic. I can only relate what happened one summer many decades ago when my sister returned home unexpectedly early from the reservation. The aftermath. In the years after this event, my older sisters would move out and on with their lives. During the winter following these events, I started to wake up in my room from time to time with a floating face of a beautiful woman over me, as gorgeous as she is terrifying. And in a flash, it's gone. This only ever happened in the lower part of the house. In the highest part of the house, next to my sister's room, where we gathered in those tense nights in August, there is a large family room. After these events, every time I take a nap on the sofa in that room, the sleep is fitful and disturbed. I have no history of sleep paralysis at this time, but now experience something like it. I wake up unable to move or speak, fight myself upright only to find I am dreaming and now awake and unable to move or speak, and the cycle would continue. I sometimes fight up to 6 layers of dreaming and waking until I'm actually awake and perfectly able to move and speak. More like a dream of sleep paralysis than the actual thing. As I am drifting off to sleep on this sofa, I will sometimes feel a weight on top of me. It often feels like it falls through me. I feel like I'm out of sync with my body and either floating over it or falling through it again and again and again. It's like a dream of falling and not falling at the same time. At the same time, on the edges of sleep, I hear a cacophony of voices chanting some indecipherable something that sounds like a backmasked clip of the Beatles. It is maybe 10 seconds long. Then it stops, and a few minutes later starts again. Sometimes in one ear, sometimes in the other. Sometimes both, but not in sync. This also happens a few times in the lower part of the house. I dread falling asleep on that sofa, and yet I seem to irresistibly drop off on it quite frequently. Nowhere else in the house do I experience this combination of odd dreams and sensations. I do not know if it all relates to the events of that summer. I only know it never happened before, and never stopped happening after for as long as I lived in that house. Perhaps this event opened up a part of me that was previously oblivious and blind to such things. Perhaps that upstairs retained some of the protection the medicine woman had placed there. I am not a clever man. I have no idea. I can only relate what I experienced. Before I continue to the next story, I just want to say thank you for choosing to watch this video, and I hope you're enjoying my narration. If you are, please go ahead and hit the like button, leave me a comment, let me know what you think of the video, and if you don't already, subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out. Story 2 by Reddit user Annie the Bonanni. I need to explain 2 things before I tell this story. First, I have a sleep disorder and I've had it my whole life. I sleepwalk. Nothing too dramatic. Mostly just do everyday things while sleeping. Open the fridge, put clothes in the washer without starting it, take the vacuum out of the closet and set it in the middle of the room and leave. That sort of thing. When I was younger, this was my every night occurrence, but now in my late 30s this is a once or twice a year thing. Second, I am native. I have a healthy respect for the stories of spirits my ancestors told. Many hunting trips I would sit around the fire with my dad listening to him tell stories of the tricks Wendigo play to try to lure you to them. While I'm unsure if I believe the stories of Skinwalkers and Wendigo, I don't tend to mess around, just in case. Shoot to roughly 3 weeks ago, my husband and I both work construction. We have hard, long and rewarding days. Once dinner is over and planning for the next day is complete, the dogs have been taken out for the last time, our heads hit the pillows and it's light out until the alarm sounds. We sleep like the dead. Pretty sure a war could break out in our bedroom, thundering tanks and all, and we would sleep right through it all, wondering in the morning where all the holes in the walls came from. Our bedroom is fairly good sized and has a small bay window in the corner. My husband likes to sleep with fresh air, so he takes the window side of the bed. This particular night, though, something woke me up. I never wake up. Dogs were quiet. Typical northwest weather. Rain quietly tapping away. No thunder, no heavy winds. I looked the dark and quiet room over, and nothing was out of place. The only noise besides the rain was my husband's box fan gently humming away. I was confused, but decided to adjust my blankets, flip my pillow, then go back to sleep. As I closed my eyes and took a deep breath to relax, I heard my husband. Babe, come out here and give me a hand with the boys." Confused and still foggy from being woken from a deep sleep a few seconds earlier, I opened my eyes to the pitch black of the room again. Rarely one of our 3 dogs will need to go out at night, and if one goes, they all will go. We live in an incredibly rural area, and it's easy for them to get lost in the dark woods. Not a good thing when you have bears, coyotes, cougars, and whatever else on the property. Babe, can you come out here and help me with the boys?" He called again, voice right against the half-open window. Not concerned, just demanding. Annoyed and groggy, I leaned up, propping myself up on a stiff pile of blankets to look at the window. It was too dark to see him. The floodlight is on the other side of the house. "Babe, come outside," my husband demanded. It was the third beckon that bothered me. He was never that pushy. If something was wrong, one of the dogs wandered off, he would say that. It's happened before. He would say something like, "Come watch these 2 real quick, I can't find Murph." Something like that. Something wasn't right. I was regaining my focus and shaking off the sleepies, quite awake at this point. I knew it was him. My husband has a very distinct voice. He's a Sicilian from Queens and has a very deep, unintentionally loud voice. It was at that moment, staring out the black window, I realized I wasn't leaning on a pile of blankets. The pile of blankets was breathing. I was leaning on my sleeping husband, listening to him call to me from outside the window. "Babe, come outside." The voice came again from the window. I put my hand down on my husband's face. He was there, asleep next to me. But his voice, or what I thought was his voice, was at the window. I laid down next to him, very, very close to him, and closed my eyes very tight. In moments like these, I'm the type to just try and pretend it's not happening. I didn't hear it again, and spent the next half of the night trying to fight off the spookies and had at some point finally fell asleep. I told my husband about it next morning after his, "Oh God, you look like death," comment. I hadn't slept well. He laughed it off as I had probably had a creepy sleepwalking thing. The thing is, when I have a sleepwalking event, I remember nothing. I don't recall dreaming, walking, or anything from those nights, no matter how hard I try. It's like a blackout. I am sure I was awake for this. Every time I think of it these past few weeks, I remember those hunting trips, poking coals around the fire with a stick while my dad tells his serious yet animated tales of Wendigo tricks to get you to come to them. I know it sounds crazy, but I think there's a Wendigo in my woods. Story 3 by Reddit user Winter Blacksmith 29. The entire decade we have been living in this house, my family has experienced disembodied voices. This wasn't something new to my family, as our previous house was very old and haunted, and we heard children's voices on occasion. I remember one day after middle school, I had a friend over to visit. Once we were halfway to my room, which was in the middle of the long, unfurnished basement, we began laughing together at either a joke or something that had happened earlier in class that day. While mid-laugh, a small child's voice emanated from a rocking horse, which was off to the side and against a wall. He sounded younger than us, maybe 6 to 8 years if I'm remembering right. He was laughing with us as if he was there the entire time, but he wasn't there at all physically. Me and my friend both looked at each other and ran out of my house with the front doors wide open. Stuff happened to me before and I heard family stories, but that was the exact moment I learned it's all completely real. Friends have called me bad luck and had refused sleepovers in the following years. Things always seem to happen when I'm around that just creep everyone out, such as small dusty handprints appearing on a friend's car while we were hanging out. To get to the point, things have calmed down since. I'm currently in my 20s and still living with my family. All of us on occasion will hear the other calling them from another room. We are no longer hearing voices of others, but voices that mimic loved ones identically. Is there anyone else who can relate to these experiences? Does anyone know what I'm currently dealing with, as I don't feel it's necessarily dangerous? But I'm going on a limb and saying it's probably not human either. I live in a rural part of Canada, and my city has been built over native burial grounds, of which some are still being dug up during construction. I've always wondered, could it be a skinwalker that may have followed me after an encounter with friends on a native reservation? Any input is much obliged. Story 4 by Reddit user A Very Living Me. I am not that great of a storyteller, but I'll just quickly write what happened. We were staying at a Hogan Airbnb on the Navajo Nation close to Monument Valley, and there were several very friendly, calm dogs roaming around. I and my friends, one of whom is deathly afraid of dogs, had no problem being with them or petting them. We had a gorgeous view of Monument Valley right from our door, and it was cold, yet cozy. That night, I needed to use the bathroom, and opened the door to the dogs going absolutely nuts. There is a difference between a dog barking at just whatever, a person walking by for example, and then there is this, total fight or flight response. One of the dogs ran up to me looking anxious and glancing into the desert behind the Hogan. It came close, then walked back to look into the desert. Its fur stood up, and it suddenly looked more like a wolf, and took off into the desert at full speed, growling and barking at a huge shadow that ran away from the dog. There aren't many huge animals in the area. Some deer and horses, maybe cattle, but this was bigger. I didn't stick around long enough to check what it was. I was pretty shaken by what I saw. Found some fresh wolf, mountain lion prints and hoof prints, probably from a horse, outside the Hogan the next morning. The dog prints are smaller. Our host said we might have seen a skinwalker. I'd like to believe it was a horse. It was dark anyhow, but the host didn't want to talk about it too much. The guides we met later on said the same thing, and kept it at that. Later that day, one friend suddenly fell ill on a tour of another Hogan and almost fainted. That never happened before in her life. The guide said she probably had some bad spirits attached to her. She recovered quickly after stepping outside. That's all. It was a really wonderful trip overall. I'd go again if I could. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I know there is a ton of content out there, and I sincerely appreciate you watching this right through to the end. Again, if you enjoyed it, please go ahead and hit the like button, and if you don't already, go ahead and subscribe to my channel and select the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of my future uploads. Also, please leave a comment on this video, let me know what you thought of it. Comments really help with the YouTube algorithm and will really help my channel to grow. Also, let me know what type of videos you would like to see more of on this channel. That really helps me branch out into new subject matters. If you have a story you would like me to narrate, please email it to me at stories@daredevil.com. I'm getting really close to my next major milestone of 100,000 subscribers. Thank you to everyone who is continuing to subscribe to this channel and contributing to its growth by liking videos and leaving comments. I'm currently in the process of working on a 3-hour Wendigo story video featuring completely original stories. Once I reach 100,000 subscribers, I'll have that ready to release for you all. If you want to support my channel even further, there are a number of ways you can do so. You can buy me a coffee via my Ko-fi account. Check out my Teespring store and consider purchasing one of my shirt designs. Or simply, help me out by sharing my content with anyone you might think is interested in watching it. Thanks again.